talked about Nate Mays, and they are bringing him in.
And here is a live look at the students that are on the field here at the Yale Bowl. An announcement has been made asking them to clear the playing surface.
What in the wide, wide world of sports is going on here?
You're listening to The Review on the OSG Podcasting Network.
Tommy Palmer, thanks, and welcome to The Review. And we appreciate you listening to us on Spreaker, our host site, Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher Radio, SoundCloud, barnburner.ca, and on our phone app at OSG Sports on your Apple device or Android device. John Wilkerson here. John Nelson and Phil Canner joins us. The band's back together. It's been a while, boys.
Woo! We're all in the same. Well, we're all in the same place at the same time. Actually, we're all on Skype together at the same time. We're not actually in the same place, but we're talking together at the same time, which is a rarity these days and a good thing. It's good to see you guys, especially as we wrap up the season with some. I guess we're kind of winding down to D-Day for the college football playoff and the best teams in college football.
Exactly. So let's review. That's what we call it, the review.
Strangely enough,
this past Saturday. I guess there were games on Thursday and Friday as well. Let's look back at the college football playoff rankings, because when this week 13 started, LSU, Ohio State, and Clemson all undefeated at 10-0, or 11-0 in Clemson's case, and 1, 2, and 3. Then Georgia at 4, Alabama, Oregon, Utah, Penn State, Oklahoma, Minnesota was your top 10. We've had a bit of a change after Saturday's game. Oregon goes into Tempe, Arizona, and gets upset by the Sun Devils, 31-28, to kind of end whatever playoff hopes the Ducks had.
Now with the lead, they're getting a little wobbly. The downfield shot, a foot race, they won't get him. Wow.
And I tell you what, I do these picks with some friends of mine, and I was so wanting to pick Arizona State to win in this game, and for some reason I didn't. I lost faith in the Sun Devils, and I was wrong.
I figured it was going to be a close game too. I thought I liked at least what I had read and seen a little bit of in terms of what Oregon had been doing over the course of the season. I'm not sure what happened other than Jaden Daniels just kind of lit up the Oregon defense. There's really not much better way to put it than that. The Oregon defense, which had been good most of the season, just basically laid an egg this game.
Well, part of it too was Oregon decided they were going to play man coverage on ASU's on receivers, and they got burned doing that, and had a tough time adjusting from that man coverage. And I didn't think Oregon was getting as much pressure on the quarterback as they usually do throughout the year. Credit Arizona State's offensive line for a great performance.
And that was one of the things that I was paying attention to, was that Jaden Daniels, especially in opportunities where when you thought Oregon was getting back into the game and they were getting close and you thought that the momentum was theirs, Jaden Daniels basically just wound up and fired. And the one touchdown that sealed it for me, you had defensive backs kind of getting lost in coverage and they're too deep, and you had receivers just going straight down the field. Jaden Daniels just rears back and fires. And you have a chance now with Arizona State. If they knock off Arizona, you could have a 7-win Arizona State team that is obviously now bowl eligible. But I think you're seeing the future with a freshman quarterback throwing north of 400 yards. Some really optimistic things going on if you're a fan of Arizona State.
CEO Herm Edwards has done himself well.
Yep.
Yeah, he has. And Arizona State, I think they're on the upswing. Now, if you're the Pac-12, obviously your playoff hopes now rely on the Utah Utes. And really, when you look at Utah, it's hard to say they're not the most complete team in the Pac-12. They've got some nice parts to their team. Nice win at Arizona in Tucson. They were south of Tempe and escaped, and they got Colorado now at home to wrap up the regular season before they go into the Pac-12 title game. But really, if there's any hope for the Pac-12 to make the playoff, it all rests on the shoulders of Utah now.
Yeah, it was a complete performance by the Utes. Another team that I like. I mean, the defense has been there for them all season, and what's going to get held against them at this point is the scheduling. Part of it's things that they control, part of it's not. They barely beat a good Washington team up in Seattle, which isn't so easy to do. Their only real exposure to a team that's been ranked this season is a game against USC, and they lost that game.
Well, that game was at the Coliseum, and they do not win at the Coliseum. I don't think they've ever won at the Coliseum against USC in school history. You hear about good losses, bad losses with the NCAA men's basketball tournament. You almost think this qualifies as a good loss because Southern Cal on September 20th, and that's when the game was played, was kind of on the ropes. And now Southern Cal is a much better team than we thought, and they're stronger than we thought, and that could qualify as a good loss. And I hate that term for Utah. And they've got some stars on that team: Zach Moss and Tyler Huntley, and the committee likes to see those kind of stars. And if they win out, to me, there's got to be some shuffling, obviously, but they've got the Utes have a really good shot at getting in.
And you're looking at a team with Utah where Colorado knocks off Washington, and Colorado is now fighting for bowl eligibility. And that was another episode of Pac-12 After Dark. And I think, guys, for me, when it comes to USC, the question to the floor is, with a new athletic director, how much of a leash do you now give Clay Helton, considering what they were able to do with Keaton Slovis throwing north of 500 yesterday and going north of 50 against your crosstown rival? So for me, you've got questions abound in the Pac-12 where Colorado could continue the chaos. And at the same time, with a team like USC, do you keep the head coach who's been under fire for most of the season? And right now they're a strong finish to the year.
I mean, it's a good question. I think at the end of the day, the Pac-12 doesn't get the love that everybody else does, in part to the fact that nobody sees them on the East Coast.
Yeah.
A lot of their games. But I like Utah. I think they're a good team. I think they've got just as good of a case to be in the playoff as a one-loss Oklahoma team at this point that's barely squeaking by in its games. They've got as good of an argument really as anybody outside of the top three teams right now. USC, what the future holds for them, I guess, remains to be seen once we hit Carousel in December. But they're not a bad football team.
Well, they are the most talented team in the USC is in the Pac-12 West. At least to me, they are. The other thing is, it depends on the availability of Urban Meyer. And there are some well-moneyed people at USC that would like to see that happen. And I think, as much as you want to groan, he's available. He's out there. Is he hungry to coach again? He keeps saying he's not. He enjoys the television. I'm going to take it on the surface there that probably that's the case. But at the same time, there are some moneyed people that write some large checks that have really big connections at Southern Cal that like to see a coaching change that are just not Clay Helton guys. And I think where USC was in September to where they are now is night and day. Keaton Slovis got his opportunity as quarterback because they had so many quarterback issues at the top with injuries. And he wasn't expected to really contribute this year. And he has gotten better and better with each game, with each snap. And so, you don't want to play the Southern Cal team now. Utah was really lucky to get them when they got them. And they still lost the game, but it was close. I think they're finishing strong, but I think the politicking in the inside the athletic center there at Southern Cal. There's a lot of politicking going on right now with the interim AD and the boosters, and I'm sure the university president. Just sit back and watch the carnage, I guess, is the best way to put this during the silly season in LA. Wouldn't you say?
No doubt. And I know that now was that who was that, Phil, that came and visited just a second ago?
That's Rosie, who is currently sitting here right here to my side, just off of camera view.
Making sure that your notes are as dry as humanly possible. But yeah, I think that when we hit carousel,
my face is clean.
Yes, I know. And yeah, when we hit carousel, I think that Wilkie, it's going to be one of the bigger questions that we're looking at when it comes to schools who either are looking, regardless of whether or not your team needs to look or not. That to me is USC, regardless of what we see in them right now, they're going to be at the top of the list. Hello, Rosie.
Yes, hello, Rosie. All right, let's move from the Pac-12 to the Big Ten. The showdown between Penn State and Ohio State. Really, Ohio State dominated this game on both sides of the ball, but Penn State hung in there, played well enough to put a little scare on Ohio State. My question to the floor is, now that we're in late November and we've got a chance to see, it's hard to not say that Ohio State's probably the best team in college football right now. They seem to have all the components, and the Penn State game kind of proved it to me because toward the end of the game, Ohio State was not giving their best effort. However, defensively, they were able to stonewall Penn State when it counted.
So Ohio State over LSU for both of you.
Yeah, but I've been saying that pretty much since the beginning of the season. I've given LSU the nod in my weekly poll on Wednesday in the Dirty Dozen.
Attaboy, nice plug.
In part just due to their schedule, but it's hard. It's really hard to argue against Ohio State and what they've done this season. I mean, it's not just that they're a good offensive team beating up on crappy Big Ten competition, which they have done, but it's a legitimately well-balanced football team with Chase Young back and playing again off suspension. Yep. They're a dangerous team on defense. On offense with Justin Fields, J.K. Dobbins and company, they can put up points in a hurry when they need to. Really, the only two questions remaining for them this season is, one, can they go into the big house this coming week and win, which they should be heavily favored to do, and two, can they finish the deal and win the Big Ten championship and then take care of business in the college football playoff?
Well, here's why I like Ohio State. And granted, you mentioned the schedule, the Big Ten schedules. It is what it is. They play who they have to play. But when you look at the results, 28 points against a good Penn State team, that's the least amount of points they've scored all season. And the 17 that they gave up to Penn State, well, they gave up 21 to Rutgers, but they had the 5th and 6th walk-ons in toward the end against Rutgers, and they gave up 21 against Florida Atlantic, and that was the same scenario. They shut out a pretty good Cincinnati team, and you know how much I respect the American Conference, but they've pretty much blown out everybody they've played, and we're talking big scores, putting up 76 against Miami O, and Maryland put up 73. They scored in the 50s and 40s. I understand that, but they didn't stop applying the foot to throat, is what I'm saying. I think that's what the committee likes to see with teams that are playing. The schedule is what it is, but it's not a very good Big Ten schedule. And Ohio State is superiorly talented over a lot of these Big Ten teams. We'll see against Michigan on Saturday, because I think Michigan's playing their best football so far right now. But I think, to me, Ohio State and LSU are 1 and 1A, and I have to give the nod to Ohio State because of the completeness of their team, just how dominating they are on the lines, and the fact that they apply foot to throat and do not let up, except when you put the walk-ons in against Rutgers and Florida Atlantic.
So then let me ask you this. The AP poll comes out. Georgia's at 4, Alabama's at 5. What do you think? Phil first.
I agree with that at this point in time. I don't know that either team's a championship level team. I think you can't read a thing into what Alabama did this week, beating Western Carolina 66-3.
No.
That's basically a scrimmage game for all practical purposes. I'm not convinced that the Crimson Tide are good enough to beat a Georgia team if they played on the field right now. I'm not 100% sure that they're going to beat Auburn this coming week in the Iron Bowl. Auburn's a tough out with a really, really good defensive line. I'm not sure Mac Jones and company can do enough damage to beat Auburn. And as for Georgia, there's something missing for them on offense. I'm not sure what it is, but that defense is spectacular. To hold Texas A&M to -1 yards rushing for the entire game is impressive at any level. And that alone should keep them in games, but they look a lot like LSU circa 2011 as opposed to a 2019 team. And that's going to be a problem because Jake Fromm doesn't look like the guy who played quarterback for the Bulldogs last year. The lack of a star wide receiver has hurt them in the passing game, but the play calling has just been strange at times. So is Georgia the number 4 team? Maybe, maybe not, but I'm not really sure there is a clear-cut number 4 team right now. And you can make a case if Utah wins out, they're just as deserving. Should Georgia lose to LSU in the SEC championship game, I don't think Alabama should have a seat at the table personally, but that's just my opinion because they haven't played anybody at all.
I'm just curious what Alabama fatigue is like in that in that room with the committee when they do the voting. Now I'm going off the AP poll. Obviously, the playoff poll comes out Tuesday, but let's go off the AP here. I'm looking at Utah and Oklahoma in pole position right now to get into that 4th spot. Utah has got Colorado next, and then the Pac-12 title game. Oklahoma. They've got Oklahoma State. Now that is a rivalry game. It's Bedlam, and anything can happen in that one. But I kind of think that Oklahoma, both teams are going to score 50 points. That's what they do in Bedlam. But I just think Oklahoma has probably got a little more superior talent, over Oklahoma State.
But they
and then you got Baylor in the title games. What's that?
They've barely squeaked by the last 3-4 games.
A lot of it's Trey Sermon's out for the year, and I can see the effect there. But again, they've done what they've had to do. That comeback against Baylor was huge, and TCU played their Super Bowl, and they're going to get that from Oklahoma State too, and it's in Stillwater this year. So again, it's a rivalry game. Anything can happen, but if Oklahoma can get by that, they got Baylor in the title game, and yeah, that's the one that would scare me if I'm Oklahoma playing Baylor in that title game. Sure, they get by Oklahoma State. So Utah is really in good position there to be that number 4 team to sneak in if Georgia stubs their toe in the title game against LSU. But to me, Alabama, they're 5th. I just don't think they're not in the title game. I just don't see how they can get into the top 4. But I've said that before about these things, and there they are. There's Alabama. And if that happens, you don't think that the expansion of the playoffs is going to be front and center?
How many heads would explode if that happened?
Yeah, and I still think there's a lot of Alabama fatigue. I think there's people in that committee that are just happy to see Alabama out of the mix for a title game. And, if they beat Auburn and they're 11-1, even at 11-1, I just don't see how you can, because their star is gone. I think if Tua was still available and playing, that would probably be an advantage for Alabama because the college football committee wants to see their stars in the playoffs.
And Alabama's not a star when it comes to branding.
It is.
No, I'm talking about individual stars.
Oh, I know. You're talking individuals, but when it comes to the brand of Alabama versus the brand of Utah, if you were trying to get the 4 largest let's think of this as like Fortune 500 companies. If you want, say, your top 4 businesses in your Fortune 500, do you want them battling for Fortune's number 1, or do you want Pepsi to be involved in the battle instead of Coke when it comes to the overseers of all this kind of stuff?
What was their profitability and their margin this year? That's what I would be looking at as far as who I want in there. Utah is like if we're going to use corporations here, they're like the hot startup that just
Google.
They just cleaned up as an IPO, and I think every advantage is going to be given to Utah if they continue to win out.
They have
and Alabama is like the legacy company that has had a couple of down years or a down year profitability wise, and maybe they want to see somebody else in that role. That's kind of how I look at it. But the Pac-12, we can say what we want about the Pac-12. It's a little better this year because they've had 2 good teams that have captured a little bit of the national spotlight. I think Oregon would probably be a sexier pick than Utah. Unfortunately, Oregon
shot themselves in the knee.
Yeah, exactly. Utah hasn't, and I think Utah is in the best position. However, if Oklahoma wins out, and there's a chance for somebody else to sneak in over Georgia, Oklahoma would probably be the pick over Utah. And It's because of that brand name. And they have Jalen Hurts. And, now one of the intrigues all year for me has been if Oklahoma and Alabama got into the playoff, and I'd love to have seen that matchup between Tua and Jalen. All of a sudden, that's not going to happen. But because of the injury, but Oklahoma to me is the brand name, and they have a star in Jalen Hurts who's been there and done that with Alabama. And again, I think those things weigh on the committee. It's not just the team brand name; it's who the stars they can market.
All right. What? Yeah. Okay. Like I said, I'm still of a mind that you're going to go with your top Fortune 500 companies because you're going to look at ratings. You want to fill your ad space. You want to get all that stuff done. So, I see your opinion. I hear it. I'm just the guy with the black helicopters. That's what I'm here for.
Oh yeah, and you're going to get some Alabama. You're going to get people that are going to pick Alabama just because they haven't really seen anybody else do anything, because they haven't really seen what Utah's done. The Alabamas of the world, the Oklahomas of the world always get that brand recognition, and it works for them. But if you look on paper, there's not a really good, compelling reason to promote them over anybody at this point. They haven't done anything. They've taken care of business, which is great. But they haven't.
Well, I think the 2 things that I've really hurt Alabama are the loss to LSU and the way they lost LSU and the loss to Tua Tagovailoa. I think those are the 2 big blows to Alabama this year.
That's the only game they've been challenged in.
Exactly. And they're going to get a challenge Saturday in Auburn. We know that. And I think let's see how they respond. Mac Jones is going to be your quarterback in a rivalry game in a hostile atmosphere. Let's see what jolly old St. Nick has up his sleeve, especially defensively, because I am totally intrigued about this game and how Alabama responds. And, I think he's a master motivator in that regard. Nick Saban is. I can't wait really to see this game, to see how they respond and how Auburn responds as well, because they got a pretty stout defense. John's watched them all year. He knows about these things.
Front 7 is a bunch of very bad people.
Yes, and fundamentally sound. It can bring you down and bring you down hard.
I must break you.
And that back end isn't bad either. And so there are a lot of great parts there for Alabama and Auburn.
And Alabama's missing Raekwon Davis, too, somebody that is vitally important to them on defense. And they're down to some freshman linebackers because of injuries and lack of depth.
This is where we need Twittered Anthony.
Yes.
Yeah, because I don't know Alabama well enough to talk about all those names other than
I think your debrief, Wilkie, this week is you and Twittered Anthony going after Iron Bowl.
Among other things.
Among other things.
And we got to figure out who's going to coach Arkansas.
Yeah, it's a whole nother conversation.
Barry Lunny Jr.
We want to take a break here, guys.
I'll get to that. Yeah, let's do a little break. All right. So you've heard our opinion. We'd love to hear your opinions out there. So get on our Twitter page at OSG Sports. Drop us a line. We may read it on air. And Phil will figure out a prize to send you. Who knows what it'll be, but it's up to Phil. Who knows? So please drop us a line at OSG Sports in our Twitter page. And when we come back, we got more odds and ends to talk about in college football. This is the review on the OSG Sports Podcasting Network.
Enjoy all of our shows from the OSG Sports Podcasting Network. The OSG Sports app is up and running. Download it today.
Soccer Down Here is sponsored by Apolinski & Associates, LLC, personal injury lawyers with over 30 years of experience. Call Steve Apolinski at 518-350-4231 or email him at steve@aa-legal.com if you need help with a wrongful death or serious injury matter. Steve Apolinski is rated one of the top 100 trial attorneys in Georgia, recognized as Legal Elite by Georgia Trend magazine for being one of the most effective lawyers in Georgia.
If you want to scale a mountain, buy boots. If you want to turn your crush into something more, say hi. At Country Financial, we know protecting the things you love and preparing for tomorrow start with simple steps. So we help you take small steps today with insurance and financial services that can have a big impact on your family's future.
For all your home, auto, and life insurance needs, call Jason Wright at 678-568-6871.
As it started, both teams eventually went to their respective locker rooms here at the Yale Bowl.
Welcome back. The three of us are back together, and it feels so good. We've talked about what we think is going to be the playoff picture. We kind of dropped our drawers and pooped on Alabama a little bit.
Whoa.
We like Utah, and
analogy. Use Triumph the insult comic dog and say, "I poop on these."
A conference for you to poop on.
Well, speaking of pooping in the drawers, how about Miami against FIU?
Nice transition. There you go, big fella.
The Hurricanes play in what was once the Orange Bowl, which used to be their home stadium. And, the last time they played on that site was against Virginia. That closed the Orange Bowl, and it was a disaster for the Hurricanes. So they returned to the site that once was their home, which is now a baseball stadium that houses a very bad baseball team, and is kind of ugly to begin with. And, not much has changed. It's cursed land for the Miami Hurricanes as FIU defeats the Canes 30-24. Thank God Miami. Thank God Miami is bowl eligible, because that's about the only
Rick
thing.
Has lost control of Manny Diaz.
Because that's the only thing that's going well for Manny Diaz right now. And, of course, this Miami team is expected to be a lot better than we thought they were. And they're still having the quarterback issues. But Butch Davis gets revenge a little bit, huh?
And I enjoyed every minute of it.
Yeah, it's funny because really, if you look at the statistics and the breakdown of the game, Miami kind of dominated in a lot of categories, except the turnovers. And if it wasn't, it really wouldn't even have been a close game had it not been a quite furious rally where they scored 3 touchdowns in the fourth quarter.
That was crazy.
Well, and the same thing too. Jaron Williams throwing 3 interceptions. That stung a lot. And again, Miami's had a little. Who's their featured running back? I mean, that's been their issue all year. They have not been able to run the ball. Yeah, that was many moons ago.
Frank Gore.
Frank Gore could probably has a little bit of eligibility left. What is he?
There you go.
Was he 49, 50 now, and still can
get
it done?
Correct.
That's impressive.
It's a great win for FIU. I mean, it only makes them 6-5 as well, but it does get them to be bowl eligible. It's bragging rights because these guys are mostly guys who have played against each other, that know each other, that all kind of frequent the same parts of town. Anytime you can see a team from Conference USA, a group of 5 team, jump up and bite the hand that feeds them in the ACC, I applaud that. There's nothing bad about that other than to just laugh and have fun. What it says about Miami and the ACC is that the ACC is some really, really bad football this year outside of Clemson. There's no other way to put it.
Well, yeah, Wake's been mediocre. Let's give them a little credit. But other than that, yes. And the Coastal is, well, the Coastal. Who wants it? Basically what it is. Virginia Tech will play for that division championship. But yeah, tough times.
Before you move off of that real quick.
Yep.
Can we just talk about what Virginia Tech's defense has done the last 2 weeks with Bud Foster? Had his last home game against Pitt. Tremendous effort. But the last couple of weeks, Virginia Tech's defense with Bud Foster, they've been pitching shutouts. It's been good stuff to see up there in Blacksburg.
And the big reason why is that back line.
And they've been playing fellow ACC teams.
Well, the strength of Bud Foster's defense has always been cover corners. And they've got that back now. And as you can see, they're getting a pass rush because the receivers aren't getting open. And that has been a big reason why Virginia Tech's defense is played so much better. They're back to the fundamentals of Bud Foster, plus the fact that Hendon Hooker took over as quarterback.
All right, Swedish chef.
Exactly. Ever since he took over as quarterback, I think that the Hokies are undefeated. I need to check on that, but I know that is a different offense now. He kind of brings that Michael Vick-esque type of role that Virginia Tech always seemed to have at quarterbacks, the Brian Randalls, those type of quarterbacks. And he's brought that vibe to Virginia Tech's offense, and it's been a totally different offense. And it's hard to say Virginia Tech's now the hottest team right now in college football. I mean, they've really won me over because I was really down on this program when the season began.
I think Utah might have an argument there about the hottest team in college football. But I mean, yeah, they've shut out Georgia Tech and Pittsburgh for whatever that's worth the last 2 weeks, and they beat Wake Forest. So it's 3 wins in a row. Good on Virginia Tech. Some respectability there in the ACC. They're 8-3, which isn't bad. It validates at least a little bit of the ACC this season, but until they play somebody ranked
better,
I reserve.
They will.
And maybe Virginia's that game for them. I don't really know.
Well, obviously Virginia Tech has Virginia's number. They've won 15 in a row over the Hoos. And if they get number 16, they play Clemson in the title game, which is a game. If you're the conference office in Greensboro, this is the game you want to see because I think if it's Virginia, it's going to be another blowout for Clemson. If it's Virginia Tech, the end result might be a blowout. I don't know. But Virginia Tech's got some momentum. They've got some confidence, and I think they'd be up for the challenge. And if that's the case, if Virginia Tech and Clemson play in the ACC title game in Charlotte, I was at that game in 2011. That was the closest the ACC title game has come to the SEC title game as far as fan atmosphere. It was packed. The downtown Charlotte was full of tailgaters. Very similar rural fan base, SEC-like fan base, and it was a great atmosphere. And that would repeat if they play in a couple of weeks in Charlotte. And I think the ACC would really like to see that because when Pitt and Clemson played last year, it was raining. There was hardly any atmosphere going on except what the ACC had. And it was just a dead atmosphere. And it has been the last few years in that building. And in such a down year for the football in the ACC, to see a championship game somewhat competitive, and I think it would be somewhat competitive. Clemson will win it because they have the superior talent, but to see that, I think, would be a nice way to end the season, which has been a struggle for ACC football.
I would be remiss in my duties if I did not bring up a couple games that I wanted to talk about this week, because they are two of the teams that were the worst in college football.
Yes.
Going into this week. If you read the Dirty Dozen and Bottom of the Barrel column that we write every week.
Excellent plug.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Where we talk about the best teams and the 5 worst teams in college football. Tops on that list of worst teams were Rice and New Mexico State. And guess what, kids? Both of those teams are on 2-game winning streaks.
Wow.
How'd that happen?
I have no idea. Somehow or another, Rice managed to beat North Texas this week. North Texas, a team I thought that would be halfway decent, but the Rice Krispies just took it to them.
North Texas had some injury issues this year, and Mason Fine has really struggled this year. He was one of my favorite quarterbacks to watch. I tell you, I'll give you this about Rice. They've been competitive throughout up until they played Southern Miss on October 26th and Marshall on November 7th when they got their doors blown. But they've been competitive pretty much throughout the year. They were somewhat competitive against Texas. They hung in with Baylor, and Baylor barely won that game 21-13. But something's clicked because they go to Murfreesboro and beat the Blue Raiders, and then they take on North Texas at home at Rice Stadium and win it. So hats off to the Owls. And let's see if they can finish off strong with 3 in a row against UTEP, and that should be a dandy of a game.
Well, yes. Speaking of UTEP, in a game that arguably could have easily been the single solitary worst football game on this past weekend's schedule, UTEP played New Mexico State at New Mexico State, and somehow or another, the Aggies, despite all of their problems this season and their lack of competitiveness with pretty much everybody they've played, they beat UTEP 44-35, which, drops UTEP into contention for the bottom of the barrel title again for like the 3rd time in the last 5 years. They're running neck and neck with Akron, the Zips.
Yes.
The one team in college football whose team mascot name describes their scores every week.
Yes, accurate.
Yes. But props to New Mexico State. They managed to win the game. I'm not sure how they did it, but they did. They're 2-9, a 2-game winning streak, and there was much celebration.
Yay.
Hey, impressive win by the New Mexico State Aggies. 23 points in the fourth quarter after only getting 21 in the first 3. So obviously the offense exploded for the Aggies, and Jason Huntley was the man for New Mexico State, especially toward the end with 191 yards. He had 3 touchdowns. It looks like he scored the most of them in the fourth quarter. Or contributed greatly in the fourth quarter. So hats off to the Aggies.
Woohoo! A couple things I saw this weekend, too, that were kind of weird, and I wanted to talk about. One of them I didn't mention to y'all, but did you get the chance to see what Youngstown State did for injured quarterback Nathan Mays on the last play of their last game of the season?
Youngstown State is taking a knee with 10 seconds, or taking a timeout with 10 seconds remaining, and this is pretty amazing what they're doing. We talked about Nate Mays, and they are bringing him in. Matt Jones and Miles Douglas, 2 seniors, will carry the senior quarterback Nate Mays into the game so that he can take the final knee of the season for the Penguins. And what a moment here. Mays, the senior from Urbana, Ohio, who we just talked about, the career, such a warrior he was, and this shows you what he meant to this team and this program as they got him in a uniform. He was not dressed, but they got him in a uniform to get him out on the field to take this knee. And I think this speaks to what this program and team thinks about Nate Mays.
Well, these are the type of team-building things that this is what you like to see. And as a senior, they're the leaders of your team. And to go out with a victory and then to have your leader take the last snap is something special the Penguins can carry into the offseason.
Awesome stuff.
For those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, Mays broke his ankle earlier in the season against North Dakota State. He's a senior. He's played all 4 years, apparently quite highly regarded by the Penguin faithful. And for the very last play of the game against Illinois State with Youngstown up 21-3, Mays' teammates picked him up, carried him on the field, and let him take a knee in the victory formation for the Youngstown State win.
Yep.
Super cool stuff.
He had not dressed out in this game initially, but his teammates encouraged him to dress out, and to see that moment, I mean, it was a great moment. And then honestly, it's another one of those reinforcers for what college sports is, and sports really are all about. But it was a really cool moment to see. But the fact that he hadn't originally dressed out, he was convinced to by his teammates. Then they take him out, take that last snap, gingerly make sure that he puts a knee down to get it taken care of. It was a great moment to finish out his season.
Yeah, that was really cool. I'm glad, I'm partial to the Missouri Valley Football Conference, being an alum from a school there, but that was really cool to see that happen. And it makes you feel good, doesn't it, about college football and looking out for each other.
Yep. And then there's the weird.
Yeah. Harvard, Yale.
Harvard, Yale.
We go to halftime, and instead of the bands coming out and entertaining, and we get some protesters coming out to protest
the field.
Yeah, they occupied the field.
The students began to gather and gather and gather, and here is a live look at the students that are on the field here at the Yale Bowl. An announcement has been made asking them to clear the playing surface. But as of yet, we are in a delay for the start of the second half of Harvard and Yale.
Basically, what was it? They want to divest from the oil companies, both schools. That was what they're protesting over, and forgiving the Puerto Rican debt after the hurricanes. So, hey, it is what it is.
And the game almost, and you and I, the three of us were discussing this before we came on the air, but the notion that the Yale Bowl has no lights, it's on purpose for part of the tradition. The game basically finished in the dark because the game was delayed about 45 or 50 minutes because of the events of halftime. So the game finished in the dark. Oh, yeah, hit it.
If you read the summary of the story, and I've watched the video, but I was at work, so I couldn't listen to it.
I did.
There was a time during the delay, where the public address announcer was trying to get the group off the field by saying, as a courtesy to both teams, the game must resume. However, the protesters responded by chanting. You want to know what they chanted?
What?
Okay, boomer.
Wow. But yeah, and the thing was, it was about 24 people initially that protested, but then you just start seeing students from both schools just streaming out onto the field after the initial protest. And it ended up being, I think it was a couple of hundred by the time it was done. And the New Haven police actually were prepared for this, but I don't think they were prepared for the number.
Fossil fuels have got to go.
No. Oh, no.
Yes, they were prepared for it, but the number swelled. I think the count was around 500.
Yeah.
The unofficial count. This was an Ivy League game. We know it's the free thinking or whatever you think of the Ivy Leaguers.
You'd have thought Cal Stanford would have done this.
Well, I'm just thinking next week in Auburn, what if that happened at the Alabama-Auburn game?
Oh, that would not have happened at the Alabama-Auburn game, sir.
I'm just saying. I'm throwing it out there because there are protesters at these schools too, but they're not going to come out in the 50-yard line at halftime in a couple of numbers and swell to 500 to protest those things at an SEC game, especially one of that. I mean,
at Auburn,
come on.
Remember,
we've got
at Auburn, they have hoses.
Yes, I know. I've been
that
there.
will not be an issue.
I'm about to say,
just throwing it out there.
A whole lot of wet protesters or blood.
Correct.
I just want to paint a mental picture between the differences between the Ivy League and the SEC, especially when come on, Yale Harvard is the premier rivalry. That's the game in the Ivy Leagues. Alabama Auburn kind of has that moniker in the SEC. And if that happened in Auburn on this Saturday, wow.
And props, by the way, and props to the broadcast team, Wes Durham, Roddy Jones, and Jack Ford.
What a combination.
It was, I don't know what the machinations were to get Wes and Roddy to call it, but it was tremendous. And with all of the Southeastern athletes that were a part of both teams, it was like hearing Wes and Roddy calling a game in their natural habitat. But I will say this, kudos to Jack Ford for leaving the booth, going down onto the field and becoming a de facto reporter down on the field during the delay, because he's played in this game as a quarterback. He knows what this game means, and he hopped right into action and reported from the field during the delay. Great broadcast.
What do you see? We wrap it up, guys.
I want to touch on a little bit because, hearing Wes and Roddy, and both are really good friends of mine. And it was great to hear them. But it was kind of Yale, Harvard, and Wes's accent, which reminds me so much of Keith Jackson.
It does.
Which I never heard Keith Jackson do a Harvard Yale game, which would be kind of cool. I always thought, someone like a Bob Costa should be doing that game to kind of fit in. But Wes was kind of a cool, different feel to that game.
No doubt.
And, there's nobody more I respect more than Wes Durham. And that, for him to get that plum assignment and for this to happen and how he handled it, and hats off to him. He's a pro's pro.
No doubt.
Yeah, let's wrap it up here, guys.
Time to put a bow on it.
Yeah. And we want to remind you that this is just one of many podcasts we do with college football. We've got our rivalries and trophy game show coming up, and it's Christmas Day for us for the rivalries and trophy game show, because it is rivalry week. We've talked to Alabama, Auburn. There's that one. There's the Civil War. There's the Apple Cup. There's Bedlam. Yes. There is so many of these great games, and a few of them, Michigan. Yeah. Farmageddon, Michigan, Ohio State. Yes, there's so many of these games. We're going to try to get as many as we can. And Phil, John, and I are going to be burning the phones to see who we can get on for during that broadcast. Who's going to come and talk to us about those great rivalries. And then we're going to put it all together and drop it out there for our listening enjoyment. So guys, this is what I'm looking forward to.
Indeed. It's I thought turkeys could fly week.
It is. Yes. 31st anniversary just passed, as a matter of fact.
And we remind you can hear us on all of our, on whatever podcatcher you use, whether it's our host site, Spreaker, Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher Radio, SoundCloud, barnburner.ca, of course, our phone app at OSG Sports on your Apple or Android device. And of course, our Twitter page at OSG Sports. We want to hear your opinions and
sportsguys.com.
Exactly. There's that as well. So any final notes, boys?
Yep, I'm good. I think we covered everything.
1AA, Division II, Division III, they're in the playoffs. Strange how they can do it, yet Division I can't.
And that's a discussion for another time.
Yes.
So for John and Phil, this is John. Enjoy the games this week, and we'll see you on the Rivalries and Trophy Game show later in the week. So long, everyone.